Okay. Hi, Song.
Hi.
So, uh, we're gonna jump right in and tell us your I need to become a therapist origin story.
Yeah. Okay. So I, like a lot of other therapists, had a traumatic childhood. I grew up with some trauma. Um, but from that, I grew like an interest in psychology. So I had took a AP psychology class. It was like pretty interesting. Um, and then another personal thing about me, when I was in high school, I actually changed high schools my senior year. So it was
Mm.
actually a terrible experience. Um, and I went and talked to my AP teacher to give her like my note to tell her I was leaving. And she was like the nicest lady ever. I never talked in her class, but when she read the note, she was like, you're going to be sad for a while, and that's okay. And I think I really identified with her also with already having like psychology. I was like, maybe I should give this a little more thought. So it ended up being something that I looked into for college. And I'm a social worker now because I realized that you could get like your degree in less time rather than being a psychologist and going to school for like 7 years. I was like, let me just do social work, do bump it out in 2 years. So that's what I ended up doing. Um, but I also have two sisters who like work in the social work field. My mom is a psychology was a psychology major as well. And something I've also been thinking about lately is how like Black women in churches also kind of do social work. And I grew up in a Black church family. So I feel like it's always been kind of in me, but I always had this interest in like, why are people the way that they are? Um, and it's just been really fascinating to me. So that's what brought me to therapy and helping people.
So, what made you decide? I know that you started with psychology,
Yeah,
you went into social work because it could be less time. But what made you decide to do social work and still stick to the clinical route as
yeah,
opposed to social work and do something like, macro social work leadership or social work
right.
case management?
Yeah. So I think part of that was what I experienced in childhood, that I was able to work through things for myself. And I also had the desire to be able to help people to get to a point where I was too. So it was like, I know that, I've been through things. I understand the layers of things. And therefore, I can understand other people and all their layers that come with them. So I wanted to be able to help people to understand themselves and find their own healing because I knew how to understand myself. And I thought that I could help other people figure out how to do that too. But I think also all of us are in some kind of ways a mixture of both. Like I am clinical, so I'm micro, but also I believe in activism. I believe in like community building. So I also feel like that is macro.
Sure. So I had the I had a less conventional route, or conventional is not the right word, straight through route, I'll
Yeah.
say, to becoming a therapist. I did other things first.
Okay.
And I think because conventional is not right, because I think a lot of people do other things first and then have this aha moment and become a therapist.
Yeah.
It's maybe it's 50-50. I don't know what your experience is like. Where there's like half of people who like know they're gonna do be a therapist, and there's this other
Yeah.
half of people who did something else and was like, oh no, I must go back and save
Yeah.
people. And I was kind of in that boat.
No, I think you're right. I think it's one or the other because there's a lot of career changers that were in my program too.
Yeah, yeah. And I think social work tends to catch those people more than people who, for example, the psychology, because psychology can catch you out of bachelor's into
Yeah.
PhDs and the doc programs. Um, I went back actually, I went back to do IO psych, which is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this thing and I'm gonna do workplace wellness. And I started taking classwork and it was like, oh, this is like an MBA, but with a little bit of Freud sometimes.
Okay.
Wrong. I'm using the wrong person, but I was like, this is not what I want to do. That's not what I'm trying
Uh-huh.
to do. And then, seeing the social justice parts of things and being in Baltimore City, I was like, yeah, I need to there's too much trauma out here. So I
Yeah.
gotta do counseling psych. So my origin
Yeah.
story was that and reading The Body Keeps the Score, which, you know, we have conversations about that book now, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's how I got here.
That's yeah. So you were thinking about like, how do I help my people?
And
I feel you.
isn't that growing up also in the black church, and I think you made a really good point about seeing black women do social work in the
Yeah.
church. That's a really profound point because isn't
I
that
yeah.
what we are?
Yeah. And I literally had this thought last week because I'm actually in a program that teaches you how to like start private practice.
Mm,
And one of the things that they're doing is like they give you prompts, and based on the prompt, that's how you figure out like what your website and your niche and all these things are like. So they were like, reflect on your story, just like you asked me. And when I was reflecting, I was like, my grandmama has been in the church, been helping people. You know, they bring the meals when people are sick and shut in, all those things, show up at your house for support. That's social work. It's
yeah,
just not a degree behind it.
just not a degree behind it.
Yeah.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Okay.
All right. So how long have you been a therapist or doing therapy?
So I went to Bryn Mawr from 2016 to 2018. So I graduated in 2018. So I think if you include the year of the internship, because I feel like, we're
You
doing
should.
therapy and as we
Mm-hmm.
should,
That's
right?
why I
So
put it that way.
yeah, yeah, labor. So I would say since 2017, I've been a therapist.
It's a
But I
long time in
also,
therapy years, by the way.
it's a long time in therapy years. And also before I went to Bryn Mawr, I did crisis counseling
Mm,
at this place called Women Organized Against Rape. So I did do like counseling, but it was more like active listening. But I've been like a therapist, I
hmm
would say, since 2017.
I haven't been in this field for that long. What do you wish people would keep in mind about therapists, helping professionals as human people, um, being in this field and the things that we do to be able to show up in this field?
I think what you said about like humanhood is super important because we are people. Um, Therapy is just something that we do, it's
Hmm.
not us. And I think that's what therapists should remember too. But also, I
Hmm.
wish people would think about the humanhood of being a therapist. That some days you might be a little more drained. Some days you might come home and you might not want to talk to anybody because you talked all day long. You understand. um, so, and also that we have feelings that you could be, talking to somebody and they're talking about their trauma and it could be triggering you, but you're still like holding it together that whole
Hmm.
time. So I think that there's a lot that goes with being a therapist emotionally. Um, and I think people do forget our humanhood. And I think that's something that we also learn in school. I don't know where you went to school, but I know that they taught us like you're supposed to be a blank face. You're just supposed to let people like project things onto you. Um, and I feel like if we were to go based on that white supremacy standard of, you know, being a blank face and letting people just project things on us and us not having thoughts and feelings, we would be not being ourselves for most of the week and most of the day.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's not a realistic standard, but
Hmm.
it's what we're told to do and encouraged to do. But do you think that's a message that you got when you were in school? Let them project on you, you're blank.
So the counseling field, there's a lot of drama in in the counseling field, and I won't get into it. Because there are these schools of thought based on
Yeah.
licensure and all this stuff and psychology versus counseling. And I'm supposed to belong to counseling, but I got a counseling psychology degree.
Mm.
That's as much context as I'll go into. So I was taught by a psychologist also. And
Okay.
you know, psychologists, they have so many different schools of thought
Yeah.
within that field, but they have this like one overarching, you know, congruent that you know, it's psychology at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So because there's this underlying thing of everything is assessment.
Okay.
So one thing that I learned from a very brilliant I went to the University of Baltimore, and my professors who were big on assessments, because that's the one thing that psychologists do that's very different from
Yeah.
counselors, or the step up or the next step from counselors, is and his thing was everything you do is treatment, even from the intake assessment, right? And so I took that to heart. And the reason why I'm saying that, and I don't think they told us to be a blank slate for real.
Okay.
They did say in the sense of like you reflect back what people are giving you. You don't
Hmm.
insert too much of your own stuff because then you start to blur those ethical lines. And I do find that as a person of as people of color, obviously I'm one of the people who's like black, but people of color because we all can do it.
Yeah.
When we get too familiar, we start to put too much of ourselves into the room and don't give space to
100%.
people. um, but I also think if you're too blank, they start to be like, "Are you here with me?" And
Exactly.
so, I remember in particular when I was an intern, taking to heart that everything you do is treatment and everything you do is helpful to the person. I did an intake assessment one time with a parent, and I did it at a center for trauma for people who were like victims of abuse. And my whole caseload was sexual abuse. And it was a mother of a daughter who had experienced sexual abuse. It was intrafamilial. And after my first intake session, she told my supervisor that she was so impressed with me and she felt so seen and so heard. She wanted her daughter to be seen by me, but like my clinic, that wasn't appropriate, right?
Yeah.
My supervisor was gonna see her daughter, but all I remember was just showing up for her and just being like empathetic to what she was giving me because her trauma history was intense. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So if I was just blank slate, like, oh yeah, this happened to you? Oh, okay. Like
Right.
that would have been so really and truly, I was just taking what she gave, but also making space for that to take up the room and engaging with that. And imagine if I would have just let her put that on me, stick as like a board,
It was
and
it,
just send
right.
her back home.
Yeah. That wouldn't have been feeling good for her. She probably wouldn't have had the reflection that she had about you. She wouldn't have said that you did such a good job. She would have been like, I was talking to a robot.
At the end, when it was time for us to discharge, she actually told me she didn't even want to do therapy. She was skeptical about therapy. I was
Wow.
like, could have fooled me. You was here
Changed your whole
every week.
perspective. Wow.
So, yes, if you subscribe to, you know, that I do CBT now, so I shouldn't even say this out loud, but hey, if you subscribe to that, I don't like CBT on the
Yeah.
surface. Now, we did do CBT there, but they allowed space for me to integrate stuff. If you do that surface level stuff, you're scaring the people.
100%.
So I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly. I wanted to add also something that you said. Oh, and even to answer the question that I posed, the thing about with therapists is like the portrayal of therapists in the media is so bad. Obviously, I see it now because,
Yeah.
but one of the biggest things is like the ethical violations of therapists in like TV shows is horrid,
Yes.
though they happen.
They do happen. I don't know anybody that's done them, but I know that it happens. Yeah.
People, and that's why, again, with people of color, I've been seeing these conversations like on Twitter and stuff. And even like on TikTok, people are like, yeah, because why wouldn't they give me advice? And yeah, because why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? And I'm like, because they're not supposed to.
Exactly. Yeah. And I have that conversation with my clients sometimes too. They're like, if only you could just tell me. And I'm like, I wish I could, but I think a lot of things are subjective. So we're gonna have to figure out what feels good for you.
How how has that gone for you? How do you work through that with your clients, and what is that like?
think it's some discomfort for them because they're like, oh, I thought you would tell me the answer. And I'm like, there's not a book that says if this happens, do this, if that happens, do that for like life. So I just kind of reflect back to them what they ask me, or like, what do you think? What are you imagining that you think you want to get from me? Or I'll sometimes I like switching the perspective. So like if it's your friend, what would you tell your friend in this situation? And then it feels easier for them to be like, oh well, I would definitely tell my friend this and this. And then I kind of say, okay, well, it sounds like that was a good answer. Do you like that answer? And so we just kind of go with that. So they'll get frustrated sometimes. They're like, you're just asking me to answer my own question. Like, I sure am. It is your life. You got to live it. So let's find something that works for you.
Right. Which leads me to it actually it goes into both things that you said. How is it being a friend as a therapist, right? Both with the advice thing, both with the showing up as a therapist who is a friend, but also not the friend's therapist. And the part of you might not want to talk to nobody or listen to nobody
Yeah.
as the friend who is a therapist.
Oof. Mm, that's a wonderful question. So the first part, I've when I first started being a therapist, I think I had to figure out that you should not be therapizing your friends.
Yeah.
Um, and also, that friends don't like it when you therapize them. They don't like it when they're telling you about something. You say, well, this goes back to, your childhood. They don't want to, they're not here for that. So I've also like asked my friends, like, tell me what kind of answer you want from me. Do you want your friend song, or do you want a therapist friend answer? Or, sometimes I won't even give it to them. Sometimes I'll just be like, wow, like, sorry to hear that. That must be hard. I just do the friend part.
Hmm.
Um, but I think in the beginning it was hard to differentiate that I should not be doing that and that it was a little uncomfy. Um, and the part that you said about like, what do I do when people want to talk and I'm like not necessarily in that place? I do less active listening. I just listen, and then
Mm.
when I reach my limit, I will say, okay, well, it was good talking to you. Thank you for telling me how you're feeling. Feel free to give me an update. We're it's the closing of the conversation.
Mm.
Rather than being like, I don't want to talk to you no more. But like,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm at this place where I've talked all day. I've reached my cup is full, or I'll straight up say I don't have space for that right now. And most of the time, my friends are pretty understanding because they know what I do for a living, and they're like, that's fine. I have other friends to depend on. Like, cool.
That was a really good point. Do less active listening and just listen. That spoke to me
Thank you.
because I feel like I always have to active listen. Otherwise, I'm not doing it well, right? Like, or I'm just not doing like I'm not a good person. I'm not a good friend if I don't actively like engross
Ooh,
myself in
yeah.
everything you're bringing forward, and then I'm burnt out.
You're so tired after. It's so much energy to do that for everyone, you know?
And then I'm hiding. Like my
Yeah.
phone's on do not disturb. I'm under the covers.
You're like, I did too much. It's too much listening, too much caring. That's how you get burned out. Yeah.
My mama calling me like, what's happening? Like,
My mama, too. I'd be like, I'll send her a text back. Hey, mom, I'm fine.
that was literally me 2 days ago. I'm okay. Thanks.
That's me, too. But I got this really good piece of advice one time from a supervisor. And she told me when I was like feeling self-conscious about like learning to be a therapist,
Hmm.
she was like, all you got to do is be a good enough therapist. Like, you have all this stuff in your head. You're trying to be the perfect therapist. What theory do I talk about?
Hmm.
What intervention do I do? That's so much work inside of your head. But if you can just be natural, let things flow, follow the energy,
Hmm.
you're going to be good enough for them. And if you ask usually when I would ask my clients, they're like, oh, you're such a good therapist. You're doing this and that for me. And I'm like, Great, great. So
Yeah.
it's for them, it is good enough. And that made me feel like less pressure.
I've received similar advice. And
Yeah,
yeah, I've received
yeah,
similar advice and I've gotten similar feedback from clients that like everything is great. And I mean, usually they want to please you, but like I've had kids who are like cutthroat
yeah.
tell me that I was great. So
You worked for that. You
yeah.
worked for that great.
So the I want to transition into another, this feels appropriate. Boundaries in
Yeah,
therapy related to the same thing with like what you want people to know, right? So I've noticed, I'm going to read what I kind of put here. I've a lot of people seem to be offended by the ways that therapists might remind them that their relationship is not a friendship and not like an advice
right.
column. And so I want to offer that reacting poorly to boundaries in this context is likely an indicator of things that we should work on in therapy, right? And
Yeah,
I think a lot of people are not prepared for that and not prepared for a therapist to tell them that. And I think
yeah,
one that's an indication of some therapists doing clients a disservice. That's number one. And I think also wanting people to know that this is why we hold the line on what boundaries are, because it's something that people need in their lives. And
yeah,
so I'll give a particular, like a small example, but like this is why we end your session on the 50-minute line or the
yeah,
45-minute line, whatever your insurance pays for,
right,
because not just because we don't get paid beyond that, but because if you have the idea that we will always give you 47 minutes or 57 minutes, you will take that outside of therapy and it will not serve you outside of therapy. And
right,
when you don't get that, you'll be disappointed anytime you can't get that 57th minute
right.
in life. And that's not how life is. What's your experience with that in the therapy room?
No, I actually totally agree with you. So it's like it's expectation setting.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to let people know that this is what to expect. Um, I think that if we're just talking about time frame, I have had people be like, oh, just one more thing. There's that thing that people will sometimes do when you're about to leave to drop the biggest bomb that we should have been talking about for the first 50 minutes. Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, by the way, I lost my job today. And I'm like, okay, but we talked about your cat and your feelings about your cat. But what about your job that you lost? So setting that frame for them that we can talk about the hard things, but maybe let's talk about that in the beginning. But with boundaries in general, I feel like even the therapeutic relationship is still a relationship. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and if we're talking about like attachment or relationships to others, it's a relationship that could be a model for relationships outside in the real world, I guess, real world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if you are crossing boundaries in the therapeutic relationship, it's also possible you're crossing them at work, with friends, with family. So you want people to know that yes, even your therapist can have a boundary, and that is the time frame. It is, make sure that you pay within this time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that we're not yelling at me in a certain way. These kinds of things that are reasonable boundaries, and we should be able to have them. But I think, like you said, people think that sometimes therapists should not have boundaries, or that it is mean for a therapist to have a boundary. But again, like talk about humanhood, we are people too. Um,
And vice
so we need
versa.
them. Yeah,
Your therapist your therapist should respect your boundaries,
exactly.
right? A lot of people, because they know that I'm, a therapist, will come be like, my therapist did this thing that I didn't like, and like, should I? And it's like going back to what you said, this is a relationship. you should be able to tell your therapist that that thing that they did was not good. You don't,
Exactly.
you can ghost your therapist. And I also tell people like, you shouldn't feel like you have to show up for your therapist all the time. And like, you just stuck in this old thing that you paid them $20 a week to do.
Right.
But you should also be able to tell your therapist like, that was trifling.
You hurt my feelings. You messed up there.
Mm. Your therapist should not be 15 minutes late every week. I've
Wow.
personally had that happen to me.
I have two. I have two. And it's just like, dang, trifling.
I talk about trying to find a therapist as a therapist is a whole other. I won't even, we can, but I won't even
We could
go.
have a whole other podcast episode just on that about what it's like from both sides of the chair.
You can also, I feel like you can also tell a little bit when a therapist hasn't had their own therapy. And I don't
Yeah.
necessarily mean has been in this like long course of therapy, but just has never had the discomfort of having to sit in a chair for any amount of time because they kind of treat your discomfort in the chair as like something you shouldn't have.
Yes. It's just like, why do you feel that way? It's like, you would know if you were going and sitting with the discomfort that I'm now telling. Like, we have to tell people to deal with the discomfort. So we can't tell them from a place if we haven't done the same thing. I feel like that's not, I don't even think that's kind because then you're telling somebody to do something and you don't know how it's affecting them and you're minimizing it. So I ain't gonna tell you do nothing that I've never thought about doing myself or did myself. Where you can deal with the discomfort, I've had to deal with the discomfort. So it's kind of just setting that up for them too in that way.
And that's why, I mean, I'm saying that you should be able to go to your therapist and say, this thing hurt my feelings, but the therapist should really be checking in to
Period.
say, like, how is this going for you? Because that's one, what we were trained to do. And the therapist that doesn't do that, one, is not tapping into their training, but two, likely has not sat in that chair and is not tapping into the fact that when I was sitting in the chair, I had this feeling, so let me check
Right.
in with them to see
Right.
how this is feeling for them too, because I remember what it was
Yeah.
like, and before I say it, let me see how this is landing for you.
Exactly. Or even if they could also not be paying attention to just human behavior. Like
Mm,
if somebody shuts down, if their face changes, if they start doing something that they weren't doing before, there's probably a shift that just happened and you want to check in about the shift.
okay, human behavior, because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, right?
Yeah.
It's psychology. It doesn't
Yep.
matter if you got a social work degree, it doesn't matter if you got a psychology degree, a counseling degree, whatever degree you got to get here. This is all
Yep.
about human behavior. And I remember I had a therapist while I was before I started my program, but I knew something was off. She was a social worker, but her day job was case management. She was like a case manager supervisor, like she worked for social
Okay.
services.
Okay.
And I could tell that she kind of treated me like a social services case. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
she was trying to fix my life.
Check
And
the boxes.
yeah, it was like, oh, like, do you have this? Do you have that? And me also having had a time doing this hybrid therapy, but real case management role after I graduated when I landed in New York, back home in New York. I know it, I know I was right, where it was like not so much how are you feeling, but do you have what you need? But I didn't come here for do you have what you need? I know what I need. I
Right.
came here for, am I okay? Right. And so I think she was missing the human behavior and she was being very prescriptive in ways that I did not need because she was missing the behaviors and she was paying attention to the
Yeah.
tip of the iceberg. And it is for some people, it works. Some people, that's all they need. But for me, it was not, we were missing each other all the time. And eventually, at first, it was cool. And again, Black lady. So we were too close. And I think she was giving me what she thought I needed. And then
What she might have
eventually
wanted.
we were just, drifting farther and further apart. And so I think sometimes we have to go back to the drawing board. And I remember in my program, I learned like one of the many things we had to read was that like student therapists are some of the most effective because they're so fresh and they
Yeah.
keep looking for that behavior. And the more veteran you get, you kind of start drifting away from the basics, which is the human behavior. And that with kids, especially, and that reminded me of when you said it, when kids will hit you with the I don't know.
Yeah.
And for some people, they'll read defiance. But eventually I noticed I don't know is just like it can be a defense mechanism or I don't know how to articulate. It just means so many things and you have to figure out
Yeah.
what I don't know means to that kid. But they're not
Yeah.
trying to like play with you for real, usually.
No, they are just trying to they could be even trying to understand what you're asking. They could not literally just not know the answer to your question. They maybe have not had space to think about what the answer could be, or that they have space to have any kind of answer that they want anyway. I've worked with kids before. I don't work with kids now, but like that was also my experience. And I've heard a lot of adults say I don't know, and I think that's okay. I hold space for you not knowing. What does it feel like for you to not know? Does it feel like for you not to have an answer to that? What if we just throw out a whole bunch of options of what it could be, and then maybe eventually we'll land on something. If not, that's also okay.
Yeah, sometimes people like sometimes I think because of psychology, we think everything has an answer and it has to have an answer now.
Yeah.
Sometimes we ambiguity is okay. And we can, as therapists, we need to just let not knowing be okay.
Yeah, I agree. Put that on a shirt. I'll buy it.
Like we we can figure it out next time. We don't have to have all the answers right now, Sway. Like
Yeah, it's
it's
totally
all right.
fine. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So I think we've started to answer some of these already, but I wanted to move into misconceptions about therapy and therapists. And let me see what I have here. I think we've covered it. One of the
Yeah.
most common things that I see is that therapists give advice. So that's
Hmm.
great. I did say that I think some of it is exacerbated by a tendency toward codependency. Um, and people, needing to get their fill from in many different relationship forms, which I think comes from a lot of so I like the psychodynamic orientation.
Yeah.
Haven't quite been able to use it in like overtly. It's been mixed in with
Yeah. A
the
little eclectic.
yeah, because most of the places that I've worked have had their modality and I've had to like push it in with other things as I've been assessing like the family system and things of that nature. But I think that when people have come from certain family dynamics, if you have someone who is micromanaging your life away, and we are now having them sit in front of us and telling them to think independently, we have just ripped away their normal way of thinking. They want
Right.
us to, fill in the gap of what we're ripping away from them. So, and then we have this phenomenon of the workplaces where like we have management that has historically been hovering in a lot of contexts. So they
Yep.
people have not really had to think for themselves depending on where they've existed. So they come to therapy and they want you to fill in that gap too.
Yeah.
So advice giving in therapy sounds like something that makes sense.
Yeah. They think that they're coming to us to have a question answered, or like for us to fix things for them.
Because it's
Like you're
also
gonna
like
be that's a lady. You go to the lady to fix it is like the phrase that they say on the internet now. Go talk to the lady.
go talk to the lady. And when you think about it, especially now, this is a whole other thing with coaching. I can go pay the coach to give me the template and I'm fixed for whatever that coach thing did. I'm going to pay a therapist to have me give myself the answers. That doesn't sound like it makes sense.
Right.
So you can add on to that, but also what are some other misconceptions you think that may not be as obvious that people might have about therapy?
Yeah, well, I was even just thinking that it's almost, I think coaching and therapy are so close. They're close. They're very close because I think in some ways we're teaching people how to think for themselves so
Yeah.
that they can get to a point where they don't need us.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's almost indirect coaching. Like we're guiding and we're
Mm-hmm.
directing. Um, but yeah, so in terms of like other misconceptions, I think people just think that we can fix things for them. We can wave this little wand and we'll do 5 to 6 sessions and you'll be
Oh,
totally over these things that you experience for your whole life. And it does not work that way. I think people don't know sometimes the amount of work that will go into therapy emotionally and that it's like a journey rather than a we're going to be together for this amount of time and then after that you're going to not have any problems with your family. um, it's a whole thing. And I think the other misconception is that it doesn't require work on their end.
mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the work is done outside of the therapy room. For a lot of people we just see them 1 hour out of the week.
Mm-hmm.
um, but hopefully they're working on skills or they are, considering some of these things when they're not in the room with you because most of their life is not in the room with you. Um, so yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's not even just that 1 hour, it's the rest of your week that you have to put in work for yourself because it's the goals that you're wanting. So you have to work for them yourself.
How do
So
you
I'd say
feel
that's a big
about
one.
how do you feel about giving homework as a therapist?
I do it sometimes. I do it
Yeah.
sometimes, especially when people are um, I've never really given it thought. I'm like, oh, sounds like you might have just given yourself some homework. Why don't you
Mm-hmm.
journal about it? It's like it's not really real homework in my mind. I'm just like, just go journal about maybe what we talked about and come back and tell me what you came with. Sometimes if I want them to work on a specific skill, I might give them a worksheet or we might do a worksheet in session. So it might not even become homework. Um, but usually I'll just do like a journal thing or I'll say, um, practice this coping skill, and that's the homework. But I do it sometimes, and I'll tell people if it gets too much, you let me know. But I might tell you to go think about some things because it's your life, and I want you to make sure that you have the say in it. But what about you? Do you do homework?
That makes sense. I generally don't like to give homework.
Mm-hmm.
I think that especially with the population that I work with trauma
Yeah,
and stuff, it 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 just adds stress to people's lives.
it does sometimes. Yeah, yeah,
So I like what you described. I think it absolutely makes sense. And in that context, like how you framed it works. I think I see a lot of, especially when I was a student, people just being like, yeah, so these worksheets, this thing, that thing, that thing. And I'm saying it that way for a reason.
yeah.
Um, and I'd be like and sitting in class like, so you thought she was gonna go home and do 30, read this book and give you 3 pages
Right.
of stuff and come back next week? Who the hell do you think you are?
I like the way you're saying it. You're hilarious. But no, I agree with you on that. That some people have this huge expectation for homework, and I feel like that takes away from what they're actually maybe trying to do. And like you said, it makes it more stressful for that person that they're and then they come back and they're like, I didn't do the homework and they feel guilt about that. And I'm
Shame.
like, you're good. You're not hurt my feelings. We're just gonna do it right now.
And then I now work for a place where they do homework as part
Okay.
of how they do things, and I'm like, all right, I guess. And it's a specific population, and it makes
Okay.
sense because it is
Yeah.
time limited because of why we do treatment with them. So
Right.
I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it is like seeing like if they will do it, and I get it. But in
I
some
feel
cases
you.
where, you know what I mean, it's like, well, to see if they'll do it or why they didn't do it. And it's I kind of know why they're not going to do it if they don't do it. You know what I'm saying? And I kind of, it's that thing when, like parents, I'm not saying that that's why we're doing it or we're
Yeah.
trapping them or anything, but like when parents ask their kids, like, how was school today, but they didn't go to school. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like, I don't want to put anybody, and it's not saying that I have low expectations, but I do know, I think there has to be a certain level of rapport,
Yeah.
perhaps, and then a certain level of understanding of how I might get this to get done before I do that. And it might have to be something like a journaling or something like a grab me something. And also, I should feel like I could remind them to do the homework as well. If I don't feel like I can say, hey, by the way, we have this thing, because I don't feel like I want to do that, then I shouldn't give
Right.
them a homework assignment.
I agree. I agree. And
I have
also,
big thoughts about that.
no, I think that some of these things that we're talking about, we could have just one podcast on one of those things because there's these,
And we
like, these
can.
are, we can, but I think that there are like topics that some therapists will find as like taboo or something,
Hmm.
or that we all have discussions about like what's right or good or bad or to do with these things. But I think another thing that has to be considered is that sometimes doing homework can be scary for people.
Yeah.
um, that like that 1 hour where you're sitting with them, they feel maybe a little protected. They have
Hmm.
somebody there that's talking them through it or easing them through it. But when they're by themselves, it could feel a little more intimidating. And I tell my clients that too. I'm like, I feel a little nervous when you try to do this. Also, it is to a degree preparing them to be able to do some of this thinking themselves, but it is also about the rapport, and it is also about you shouldn't do it too fast. Um, Also, some people don't understand all the therapy jargon or what you're even saying to tell them to do. And so they could be anxious and not sure that they're doing it right when you tell them to do something. So I think that's another thing that goes with homework and wondering why a person may or may not have done it. Just a whole bunch of things to consider.
I had something here about therapy jargon actually, or I think you might have brought it up. And so I put it here. Explaining therapy jargon.
Mm.
I'm gonna just open up, give me your thoughts if you had some ready
Yeah.
to go thoughts, or I can just jump in. But
I didn't have anything ready to go. I was just thinking that it. I sometimes think that, and I think a lot of therapists do think that they're explaining something in a way that is straightforward, but we are using it in a way that we would say it to each other.
yes. I so when I started as an intern, um, because we were dealing with trauma, abuse cases and stuff like that. I think that's why anyway, we went over the paperwork that people signed when they started working with us. And also we didn't bill. So we weren't working on constraints really with time in terms of like, if we don't do this, we don't get paid. Everybody was salaried. It was just a matter of managing time so that people weren't like burnt out.
Right.
And when I started to look for my own therapist as an adult after that, I realized therapists just kind of sent out the paperwork and was like, sign this before we could have our first session. And I was like, hold on. um these and they had way more papers than we had, and
Yeah.
what they sent out, and even like because they had like billing wording in it, and I started reading some of the billing wording and I was like, I don't actually like how this is worded.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I know I could understand it because I'm a, college educated,
Yeah.
such and such. So I could really look through it. And I remember this one place that I was looking for therapy. And, I was an intern at the time. So this is no shade to interns, but they were going to pair me with an intern because I was trying to self-pay. I thought self-pay was like $50.
So
I
how much
started to
was
get
it?
I started to get self-pay quotes that were like 175
Yeah.
minimum, New York City, in 2020. And so I got this one place that was like they have an intern with an opening. So I'm like, okay, maybe this would be a little bit less. And they kept telling me like, oh, my appointment is this day and this time, and I'm like, sending me paperwork, and I'm like, hold on, how much is this?
Yeah.
So I'm reading the paperwork, and then I was like, hold on, stop. How much is this? To the point where I was
Yeah.
like, I will not log on to an appointment for the consultation or whatever until I know. I don't even
They
know if
wouldn't
it was
even tell you?
$115 a session to see the MSW intern.
Wow. They would get paid.
I was like, listen, I'm an intern and I don't get paid.
Yeah.
So I was like, are you paying the intern?
Yeah. Are they getting that?
And are they getting the 115? I said, no, thank you. Have a good day.
And as you should have. As you should have.
What are we talking about?
Because what?
For somebody who is gonna roll off eventually, so I'm not gonna like there's not gonna be continuity. I was like,
Right.
you think I'm human?
It's for the semester or the year, the school year at that, not even a full 12 months.
And I know not all MSW programs, but a lot of MSW programs, they don't do one internship the whole time. They switch off. At least my friends did.
Yep.
Um, so I say all that to say, I got a little off track. The jargon for someone who doesn't know, for someone who can't read the words for what they mean, because a lot in therapy world, we'll use in psychology, we'll use words that mean regular things and they don't mean that, which is why people
Yeah.
think trauma bonds. I have an episode somewhere that is in drafts that
Oof.
I have to edit.
As you should.
And some of it is people taking things out of context and do what they want with it. But some of it is that we use regular words and we apply very sophisticated meanings to them. And that is why people can do that because we probably could have used a different word. So I think in that episode, I looked it up and they used a different terminology for trauma bond. It was something like abuse,
Yeah.
something. It made more sense. The word that was used, the terminology that was used for it instead. It was like abuse,
The
maintained
cycle.
something. So
Yeah.
it was, yes, very
Maintaining
different.
the relationship with the abuser and the person that's being abused.
It was
Yeah.
two, it was like three words instead of two, but described the relationship. And even like, I actually don't like limits to confidentiality. It does say what that is, right? But it still sounds a little far away. Like, why can't we say confidentiality exceptions?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it just, so that paperwork that we send out and say we can't see you until you signed it, limits to confidentiality still doesn't, I don't think it does what we want it to do. And
No.
so I think the jargon really just sets, and people just gonna nod and smile at us. I've learned that in therapy, they're not going to ask
So
us what
bye.
things mean.
Yeah, I've seen that too. And I've been very thankful for the clients that have said, "What do you mean by that?" Because then I'm like, "Oh, thank you. I thought you knew, but I'm glad that to know that you did not know, and now I can go back and say it the way that I should have said it for you." Um, yeah, so I feel like there's a lot of phrases or just jargon in general that we should change it or speak it in a way that is more descriptive. Like, first of all, narcissists, people call everyone a narcissist. And then you have to kind of be like, well, there's a clinical diagnosis called narcissistic personality disorder. These are the criteria. The percentage of people that have that is very low. They could have a trait of it, but they're based on the percentage, they're probably not a person that has that personality disorder. So there's that. There's also, the phrase holding space for you. I've had people say, "What do you mean by I'm holding space?" Or, like phrases.
Really? That
Yeah,
makes
they're like,
sense.
what do you mean by that? Or let me think. Even just like actual other diagnoses, like bipolar disorder, people just will throw that out and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, she was acting so bipolar," and like, that's not what that really means. But it sounds like you're saying that this person was going back and forth. So I feel like there's a lot of jargon that we use, but also that people use based on, these apps like TikTok, Instagram. A lot of things can be sensationalized and made to for people to think that it means something when maybe what they're saying and describing does not mean that. So we have to be more explicit in what we're saying and so that people can actually understand what we're saying, so that these type of misunderstandings happen less.
Yeah. I think also, I think we take pride sometimes, and I think that I say we as in the field, it takes pride sometimes in things being complicated and
I
inaccessible,
agree.
and
Ooh,
especially from the
bougie,
academic sense. Yeah, we just
bougie.
like a little bouge, and then people take the bouge and redefine it, and then it gets away from us, and now we can't get it back. It's gone. And that's why everybody's talking about they're a little OCD.
Yeah. Okay. Like, let's pull up the criteria.
And it's not. And it's not. Like some things have gotten away from us, yes, but other things like we helped make that into the monster that it is. And now we're like, oh, they just don't understand. It's like, well, we didn't help them understand.
I agree. Yeah. We wanted it to be sophisticated for us, and now it is too sophisticated for other people to understand. Even sometimes for us to understand, like even the book that you mentioned, the
The
body
body keeps the
keeps the
score.
score, is very jargony.
That first third of the book was I was I was
I tried
and
so hard. I
it
tried.
was before I got into my program. That's what actually made me
Yeah,
switch to counseling. And but I was like, all right, I don't know what none of this means. I'm
you're
getting
right.
there.
I didn't finish because I was like, what is this person talking about?
The second
I
half of the
got
book
through parts
is
of it.
the part that's
The better.
accessible a little bit.
Okay. I read this book that's by Oprah, and I don't know what the other man's name is, but he's like a psychiatrist, and it's called What Happened to You. And I found that that one was easier to understand versus The Body Keeps the Score. I do want to go back and try to finish it, but I
Mhm.
just know I read it and I was like, what are you saying?
He has a good, what I liked in that one, again, problematic things. And when I read it, I was like, this is
Yeah.
a little weird. But he has a good description of EMDR in there. And I want to get trained in that
Me
at some
too.
point. And that was the real what I left with that book was him talking about EMDR and him going through the training.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's another book that someone recommended to me called My Grandmother's Hands. I think it's by a black man. I could be
I
wrong
heard
about
about
that,
that.
but I know it's by a person of color.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, so I need to try to read that. But I had to take a hiatus from reading trauma psychology books. I just
Same.
needed to take a break.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. All right. So the next, what I wanted to do was transition into talking about just briefly before we close out about the process of like, or encouragement for therapists and aspiring therapists. But before I make that sharp turn,
Yeah.
is there anything else you wanted to cover about therapy and being a therapist that I didn't bring up?
No, I don't think so. You did a very thorough job.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to talk. Well, let's start off with this question. What caught you off guard the most when you started your career post graduation? If anything, I this is from my personal experience, so that's why I asked the question that way. But if
Yeah.
anything, what caught you off guard the most being an actual professional?
The politics that
Mm-hmm. There we
come
go.
with being a therapist and
Mm-hmm.
working in a therapy setting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also that sometimes going back to humanhood, sometimes, the therapist that is helping people inside the room might not also be a very kind person, that
Mm-hmm.
goes with the politics. They might also be a little bit racist. It's been
Mm-hmm.
surprising to me because I think when I went to grad school, I was like, we're all here to help people. I was on my hippie tip. I was like, we all
Mm-hmm.
love each other and we care about people. And then you hear the way that some people talk about things, and it's like, wow, you're about to go be a therapist. I'm just gonna pray for the clients that you have. But also, yeah, so that part, knowing that people are people and only are working to the extent that they want to work to, and the politics of it all, I think those were two very big things for me to hold because I was like, wow, do you mean that like we're not all kind to each other in therapy fields. Like that that was shocking to me. And maybe it should not have been, but I think maybe I thought it was like all Barney and friends on this side that
Mm.
like we was all gonna, be nice and kind to each other, and that was not always the case. It's still a professional setting, and in all professional settings, there's things that come with it. I think that was very shocking for me.
Ditto.
You feel me?
I I'm just gonna say it plainly. I have met some
Yeah.
of the most unhinged people in this space, period.
Uh huh. Yeah.
And this is why I made that comment about like people who are doing this and have likely have never sat in a therapy chair, right? I'm not saying that you're unhealed, like that weird stuff, but I'm saying you've never had to receive empathy. Like empathy comes from having experienced a thing. And you could not possibly be asking me to do this to someone else because you have never been on the receiving end of that. I
Right.
know that. And even just how you supervise or how you
Yeah.
interact with your coworkers, that is unhinged. And I don't know what you were doing when you were learning how to be in this space, but you missed a couple classes.
Yeah. You weren't there that day.
You didn't participate in the listening sessions and you missed all
Right.
the clinical work. I don't know what
Right.
happened, but you weren't there. You failed that part of the class. I don't know. And they didn't make you retake it.
Right. Oof.
And I mean, I've been in some workplaces in this space where I was like, when I worked at Macy's, I had a better time. When a customer was screaming in my face, it was hands down better than this.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. It's shocking. Well, it's not shocking now, but I think
Yeah,
it's shocking when you realize that it's still like that it can be bad on this side too.
yeah. And with the caveat, my internship experience was the best work experience I've
Hmm.
ever had,
Me too.
ever had. So that's why I said post graduation because I was so bright eyed and bushy tailed and I
We
got
all were.
dropped off. I was emailing them like, I miss you guys so much.
Come back and get me. Take me
And I mean, I had classmates that their internship experience was not like that. You know
in.
what I
Yeah.
mean? So to be fair, it was varied, but I still email them. Like I still talk
Yeah.
to them. Um, but I think I had like a very incubated experience. I was like locked in with my national org committees and things like that. And that's what helped keep me in the field because I had a moment where I was like, listen, it's been cool and all, but I'm about to go
Yeah.
run an organization somewhere in management or go find me a
Yeah.
research position if I can, associate. I know how to do a couple things. I might not know SPSS real good, but I'll figure something
SPSS.
out. I gotta go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot to the shift is a lot. And that's why burnout is so high within, I think they say, the first 5 years. And I
Yeah.
remember when I heard somebody say that, I was like, how could you ever be burned out for 5 years? It's not that
I said the
long.
same thing.
And then I realized that I was burned out maybe after the first year. And I was like, poof, you gotta start
Yeah,
taking care of yourself or you're not gonna make it
the
all
first
these
year.
years. It's a lot. It's a lot that to humanhood, it's a lot on us for the shift. It's a lot.
Yeah, I think part of that is there was a level having such a good experience in your program. There is a level of like haughtiness that you develop. And you're like, I got this. I don't know what anybody's talking about, but it's gonna
Yes.
be good. And then the reality hits you because who do you think you are? And
Special.
they know you need them to get to the next level, licensure hours, all of that. You need this little piece of shit job we have here. So you're gonna play nice, you're gonna do what we tell you to do because you don't have that many options, especially for me coming out into the counseling situation and what that looked like in a social work city
Yeah.
and all of the things considered. But I didn't know. that none of those people could give me what I needed, but they didn't want me to know that. So if I stayed in those roles, I would have never gotten what I needed. But as long as I didn't know, I would have been just stuck there. But if I
Yeah.
wanted to pay my bills, I would stay stuck there and shut up.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so they didn't tell me that. And then, if you stay in those roles, not even them needed to be licensed. So new social work grads were coming in trying to get hours, and they realized that person couldn't give you your hours. She don't have a license.
That also happened to me as well. I can tell you some things when we're not on camera, but yeah, there's a lot of unethical things I would say that happen to therapists when they're first starting because, like you said, they know that you need to be there. They know that you need to start getting your hours. You're in a rush to get those done. They know that you're going to take whatever pennies they throw at you because what other option do you have? And I think thinking about that, if I was to, one day, I'm hoping to have a private practice, but if I was to make my private practice a group practice, I would hope to be the type of supervisor that makes it a good place for people to work at so that when they're first coming, they don't have to go through some of that beginning. I almost want to call it trauma, but like going through those things that we've had to go through in the very beginning. I want to make it
Yeah.
easier for people that look like us. I think that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like knowing the licensure laws in your state, that was one of the biggest things for me. Because then when it came to, and so the social work people paid the most money in my city, the social work, social services type roles that did therapist-y things, the hybrid kind of stuff, paid the most money. But that posed licensure issues for me in a way. But then the counseling type of situations, they ain't have no money, at least for me to live as an independent person who was not
Yeah.
22 coming out of undergrad or 24 going straight through,
Yeah.
right? And so I was like, I mean, I do want to do this, but I can't afford that. I don't live at home anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And also doing counseling in New York was not the same as what I was preparing for in Maryland. And
Yeah.
so then it was like, I didn't know there was this much of a difference. And that became a whole thing. And it was like, everybody was kind of like, okay, well, today's your first day. We need you to do this. I don't know. I can't worry about that right
Right.
now. We'll
They're
figure
like
it out.
moving on.
And I
And
was like,
also some places where you have to pay for your own supervision. And it's like,
oh,
you're here already. You're already being paid. Why do I have to pay you? You got to be here during the day.
and people can make a killing off of charging you for supervision. That's like paying for therapy out of pocket.
Yeah, it is.
So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see. I'll one last question. Well, let's do a twofer. So one is about training to be a therapist while being Black, and best advice you have for people considering becoming a therapist and new therapist. So that's like a threefer, but
Okay.
all in one,
Yeah.
doing all that while you're Black.
Oof. It was a time. So I went to Bryn Mawr, which is pretty white. Um, and I grew with this group of black girls that we all kind of were. We would be in the defense mode in some of our classes together. It would be very hard. Um, and this goes to the point that I made earlier, where sometimes I thought that we all, because we were social workers, we were all well-meaning. We all wanted to help people, but then you would be in class with somebody and you would hear them say a racist comment, and it's like, wow, it's really like this, and I pay to go here. Um, and so it was difficult at times, and I would say that I made it through because there were other people that looked like me. There were other brown people there that we had solidarity with each other. I actually ended up making a support group for the people of color at my school in my program because I felt like we needed a place to be like, these are all the terrible things that are happening to us, or these are all the things that are difficult for us to deal with. How do we sit with this discomfort in this classroom, or how can we advocate for ourselves? And so I found that to be really important. Um, but it's definitely hard when you are one of the only. And I think also, in addition to being Black, I was also young and I was a woman. And then you add those three things together, and sometimes you don't even know what you're dealing with. You don't know that people have thoughts about you because you're young, gifted, black.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I found that to be something that I came to a bunch of times, and I would maybe even think that it was about me. And I was like, maybe I'm doing something wrong. But then when I look at it from the outside, I was like, maybe this isn't me. Maybe people are just intimidated by me being black and having things to say and being young and being a woman, and it's not my personal problem to deal with. Um, but I feel like that was the thing that I came into encounter with a lot being black and doing therapy. But with thinking about how to help, you said the people that are coming in, like the new people,
New
advice
therapists
for
or people
them:
thinking about it. Mm-hmm.
do not do it lightly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Make sure you take care of yourself, because it's so easy to let go of your self care because you think you're doing it for a higher purpose to like help people. And you can't help people if you are not helping yourself. So if you feel empty, it's going to show up in your therapy sessions, whether your client knows it or not, whether if it's at the end of the day and you have nothing left. Um, you want to make sure you're pouring into yourself. I also say community is so important. So whether that's like you just having friends you hang out with and making sure you keep a social life, or even having therapist friends. I think it's been very important for me to be like, hey, therapist friends, let me tell you something that was like super awkward that I did in the session. And they're like, yeah, girl, did that too. Totally fine. It's very validating. So I feel like community is important, self care is important. If you get paid time off, make sure you take your paid time off. Take the
Mm-hmm.
day off if it's a holiday. You should not be working. Nobody else is working. Why are you working? Feel like those are the things that I wish somebody told me when I was first starting out.
I want to jump onto the self-care one.
Yeah,
Um, People say it all the time. It's like almost cliche at this point, but I think there's some specific like details to that really need to be like drilled into. I remember in my program, there's a lot of people who think that they're gonna like get this degree on the side type thing, and it's not that. Like self-care is
yeah,
being practical about, because what you said, don't take it lightly. That's together for me. This is not a degree you just go get while you can. Because so for counseling, you don't have to start internship right away because it's a year and a half. And
okay,
the timing, like this, the last year has like way more hours than that first year, right? In social work, you start the internship right away.
yeah,
How are you going to do that on the side? I
yeah,
remember that one of my friends, her internship placement was actually at a school that had an MSW program to help place other people. Oh Lord.
wow,
So she was dealing with people coming into the office being like, yeah, I need an internship placement that's outside of my 9 to 5. Not only is it just impractical, it's like disrespectful.
mm-hmm.
Not just to the people in the program who are trying to help get you placed, but to the people that you're supposed to be helping at your internship
Yeah,
placement. Some people have a sweet deal that they kind of like set up beforehand. If you can do that, go for it. But
yeah,
coming into a program and expecting that to just be figured out for you is is nonsensical.
right,
And if you are in that, like, listen, you want to get the degree, you want to get the degree, but you don't have to get the degree. It's not supposed to be handed to you,
right,
right? And I say to somebody who is real Jamaican, I'll have 3 jobs. Not no more, because I don't want that
I've
life for me no more.
I've done it too.
You know what I mean? And when I first started my internship, I had literally 3 jobs in my internship, but I had like 3 part-time jobs because
Yeah,
I needed to maintain my life.
right,
But I literally did nothing else. Self-care was, it was a crazy sacrifice. We were in the height of the pandemic. So there was not really an outside to go to for real.
Yeah.
And I felt really good. I got so much done. I was so productive. It worked. But people started going outside that 2021 summer, and I started to feel sad. Like I started to feel really sad. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But it was possible. Once I hit 20 hours a week, I needed to maintain a caseload of 10 to 13 clients. It was done. Like I had to give that up. Or did I work full time? I had two jobs and I worked one of them. Either way, it was 40 hours a week I worked. Okay.
That's a lot.
And
That's
that
a lot of
was
therapy for people that don't know. It's a lot of therapy because also you doing your notes. Yeah.
40 hours a week. And my client load at the time was about seven-ish. 40 hours a week of a full-time job. And then I did
Yeah.
like 7 clients. And then I had class. That even that saying that out loud is ridiculous. So, but I did evening clients and all of that. I say all that to say, I'm rambling a little bit, that you have to know that the requirements of the degree are not going to work around like the fact that you have to put food on the table. We all know you have to put food on the table, but the
Right.
requirements of the degree have not changed for years.
Right.
These are practice degrees for a reason. And nothing that you do in your internships is not going to help you in the real world. It's not possible to do this degree without doing the practice. Like every hour of your internship counts. I
Yeah.
guarantee it. Self-care is being able to do every aspect of this degree properly
Yes.
and getting sleep
Yeah. Don't shoot that.
and maintaining your friendships. You will
Yeah.
not be able to not have a social life and make it out of this degree and not present it. It's not possible.
Yeah.
That's my
And then
spiel.
that's how you burn out faster because you gave up your whole self to a job. That which is why I said in the beginning, like we're people that do a job.
Yes.
I work as a therapist, but Psalm is not just a therapist. You're not just a counselor. And
Yep.
if we forget about those parts of ourselves, it's so easy to become the job. And then
Yep.
all you're doing is working and you're burned out by the end of the night.
Yep.
And it's
By
not
my
fair to you.
it's not fair to you, it's not fair to your clients.
Right.
You haven't been on a vacation in 2 years and you're mad because your client said they just came back from Dubai.
Leave. Go go on a vacation.
You clock out for me, dear.
Clock out.
Turn it off.
Go ahead.
Are you sure that you should be spending money on Dubai? Log out, babe.
Yeah. Period. Oh my God.
I think also, I don't know, I would add this too. It doesn't really matter where you get your degree from, for real, in terms of notoriety.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to the most reputable. No, no, no. Not you should go to a reputable program. You don't have to go to the most expensive program. We
No,
should
you
go
don't.
somewhere where like you like the professors. I think that's important.
And
Go
what you're
where you
learning
should say that again.
and what you're learning.
Yeah. The coursework is going to be the same for the most part across schools. They might throw in one or two extra things, but there's not much room for wiggle. Um, but the professors should be a little bit interesting. They should be people that you kind of are interested in or know of. Um, if that kind of ties into notoriety, the only time that it really matters is if you want to get a PhD, but then we're not talking
Yeah.
about just being a therapist there. That's something else.
Right. No, that's something else. That's on top of that.
So
Doesn't
those are
matter at all.
my anything to add before we close out.
No, this was really good.
Thank you. You've given me a lot to think about, even as I think about what it means to do therapy. And
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things that I'm thinking about is like community among therapists.
Yeah.
Um, and thinking about community among therapists for the purposes of edifying each other, but also just providing better care to clients. and how we can really think about what it means to be more accessible and providing more access to what we do and why we do it that way.
Right.
Because a lot is out there and it's not coming from us.
No, it's not. It's the boards of things. Boards are a lot.
The words that people think that they can report us to for things like things that don't make sense, but then they don't report us for things that they should be reporting us for. That's a whole other
The boundary
conversation.
violations of things.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining me. We'll have you
Thank you
back
for having
real
me. Yeah,
soon.
yeah, I would love to come back. It was so good. I appreciate you having me.
All righty. Hold on.